So I've put a few images here, and I just want you to think throughout the talk of why I put these images here. Various instruments. Why would I put various instruments on here? Are the qualities of these instruments, are they good quality? Are they clean? What type of notes do they play? Who plays them? How many years does it take to practice? How do you hold them? Multiple variables. And then think about why I put this image here. What's going on? The instruments are being used. They're being played by various people. And then who's leading the orchestra? And you see, if you've been to a live concert and you're sitting there in the concert, you're enjoying the sounds, but you know, it doesn't sound quite as good as a recorded album, right? It's like, God, it doesn't sound as good as a recorded album. Why is that? Well, why did I put this here? So, researchers suspect that late onset Parkinson's has susceptibility genes rather than causal genes. There's a lot of war out there. There's faculty at Bastyr and there's faculty everywhere in the world that say, you know what, genetics is not ready for prime time. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your money. It's conflict of interest. It's just don't do it. It's fear. You're scared. Other people are saying, you know what, it has nothing to do with causation, but has everything to do with pinpointing susceptibility. And that's where I like to focus. I like to focus on susceptibility rather than causation. And so if you look at susceptibility genes, then you can take action and understand what these environmental triggers are and what's going on if you understand how genes work. But none of us were taught how genes work. Even doctors were not taught how genes work, just ignored. So researchers believe if they can work out the mechanisms of Parkinson's, they can disrupt it in some way and therefore halt the onset of the disease. So that is also what I really focus on, is the mechanisms. So in your StrateGene report there, David's sample that he provided you graciously, you'll see that there's a list of SNPs, but you'll also see that there's mechanisms going on, and they're not in isolation. So this is from the Huge Navigator website, and 617 genes have been identified with Parkinson's. And so going down from the left column down and over towards your right is the most research associated with that. So LRRK2, SNCA, PARK2, MAPT, GBA, ApoE, and so on. Down the list, LRRK2 has the most research done on it. And as you go down, you can see TNF-alpha, you can see MTHFR is on here, on the lower left. So there's a lot of genes here. So, okay, 617 genes. So what are we gonna do? Are we gonna make a genetic profile that we test 617 genes and then evaluate if you have them all? And if you have them all, let's say you have 33% of them, they're all plus plus. Is that useful? What do you do with that? I don't think it's useful. It's not actionable. So what I've done with StrateGene is I have a team of researchers where we have evaluated over 700 SNPs. Because how many of you ordered genetic reports and have had about 40, 50 pages of SNPs on there, and you're looking through there and there's plus plus, there's plus minus, there's reds and there's yellows and there's greens, and you see the reds and you're like, oh damn, right? That's your first thought. And then you look at that and then you go and you start digging up the research, reading the internet, reading forums, Facebook posts, getting misinformation left and right. You don't know what's going on. So what we have done is we've taken clinically relevant genes, various specific SNPs, that RS number you see on the left column. These are all supported by research and literature. I've removed the noise. So we have gone through all these other genetic reports that are popularly used today, and we removed all the garbage. So if you see it in StrateGene, it's relevant. Now, the other thing you should understand is if you see red, it's not bad. All it is it's different, and we will be changing the colors in these because I don't want that mindset. I don't want you thinking if you have MTHFR and it's red that you are in trouble, that you're bad, okay? I have MTHFR personally as well, more significant than David's actually. That's not, it's on the next slide. So red isn't bad, it's different. These are selected for in nature. There are reasons why these are selected for. Where are your ancestors from? What was the food like? Did where David came from, his COMT, he's double homozygous. That means his dopamine is sticking around in his brain longer than someone's who is minus minus. And people who have COMT minus minus, they're like, woo, yeah, this is all fairy dust, and they can't focus. They're not doing well in school. I bet you're a pretty damn good student and attentive, right, in school? Very attentive. But the problem is, if you're super attentive, you're also very susceptible to stress and anxiety. Is that true?
It wasn't as a young man.
As a young man.
Parkinson'S diagnosed.
Okay, okay. So, and it all depends. And I've had patients who have been COMT++, and the best thing that they've done was move away from the city and live out in nature. And so if David's childhood was supportive and great family and doing sports that he loved and a good school, good environment, good friends, then he wouldn't be feeling that stress. So again, don't think of plus as bad, just think of them as different. And different meaning what the majority of people have. Does that make sense? And that took me a long time to figure out. Because the first time I got my genetic report, I looked through it and I was like, dang, I'm in trouble. So you get this report back. And what most people do is they stay here, right? This is where they go. The rest of StrateGene is garbage. They don't look at it. They want to know what these are, and then they get all upset. It's like, why do you have only 2 pages of SNPs? Why don't you have 45 pages? I want more. Say, well, you heard, quantity is not quality. So this is where most people stay. And they might flip the page and they go right to MTHFR because that's what everybody talks about. There's a whole website on it, but this was the first gene I ever studied and I found in the literature because it's the most published on, at least at the time. And so that's where I started. And I soon realized when I worked with individuals with MTHFR, some got better, some didn't, some got worse. And that led me to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, there's 19,000 genes in the human body, not just one. But this is where a lot of people stick around and they don't know what to do with it. So if you see here, StrateGene doesn't give treatment advice. We don't tell you to take this supplement. I own a supplement company. I could be making gazillions telling you to take a specific product of mine, but I don't because everyone's different. You might not need additional methylfolate. No, I can't tell. I don't know you. So, but I tell you how the gene works, what it does, the factors that influence it. The down arrow means the things which will slow it down. So you should know what slows the gene down, and the health professionals too, and there's things which speed the genes up. So what makes the gene work faster? The cofactor is what supports that gene working. FAD is the active form of vitamin B2. So I give you that information. And then the SNPs, what does that mean? What does MTHFR 1298++ mean? Well, what I want you thinking about with the SNP is speed. That's it. Don't think about what it does. Think about how fast it's working or how fast it's not working. How much of it is it slowed down? So if we can find the kinetic variation, meaning the speed in which that enzyme is working, how it's different, that is what you need to know. So David here, his MTHFR gene is reduced in capacity by 40%. That means he has 60% left of his MTHFR working. That means if he's not totally stressed out, consuming alcohol, he has adequate vitamin B2, and he's not taking a bunch of folic acid or anti-seizure meds, then his MTHFR is doing just fine. But on the flip side, if this individual is drinking a bunch of alcohol, they're low in vitamin B2, they're chowing down on the folic acid, and they have seizures, so they're taking these anti-seizure meds, then I bet you their MTHFR is causing problems. Does that make sense? So it's a capacity thing. We have 2 hands. We can only do so much work. So as soon as if you're carrying 2 suitcases and your lovely kid says, Dad, can you carry me? You have to put the suitcase down or you tell the kid to walk. Same with MTHFR. They have jobs to do. So if you give your genes too much work to do, you get symptoms. That's it. You reduce the workload your genes have, your symptoms go away. Make sense? So you can drink a little bit of alcohol, you drink too much, you get drunk. What happened? Your genes got overloaded. You don't get much sleep at night, you wake up the next day groggy, not thinking very well, your genes didn't get the nourishment and the time to repair that they needed. You get a good night's sleep, you go on vacation, your genes don't have any work to do. You're not burning them, you're having fun. You're relaxing out in the sun with your family. They're chilling out. Your genes are restoring and rebuilding. Symptoms go away. StrateGene is fully resourced. The link for all of our research where we get these things is at the bottom. seekingout.org/bibliography. So if we tell you that cofactor is FAD or it's sped up by DHA or low methionine, we cite it. Information is there. So never look at SNPs in isolation. I started with MTHFR, yes. A SNP is a misspelling in the gene. So think of it as if I said the word 2, and I just said the word 2. Am I talking about the number 2, or she went to the store, or I want to go to, right? So you don't know quite what I'm saying, but it still works. It still works, but you don't know what I'm saying. But if I said, you know, you see that cat over there, and then I said, you see that cut over there, it's a totally different thing. You don't understand it. So it's a misspelling in how the gene is written. So genes they're a long list of amino acids, and every amino acid has X amount of letters. And so if one of those letters is switched and it causes significant misspelling, then it causes confusion in the body. But what it really does is it changes the function of that end product. So genes make enzymes, typically. And so if you have a SNP in the wrong place, it can change the function of that gene. So let's say my hand is MTHFR, and if I have the same as David, the 1298, maybe my hand is shaped like this. So I can still do work, but it's a little bit less functional, right? So good question. Sorry.
And do we all have SNPs?
We all have SNPs. We all have SNPs. There is a known 1.4 million SNPs typically. Every person has about 30, 40,000 of them. Yeah, but most don't cause any problem. The SNPs that we focus on in StrateGene and most good reports out there, which are unfortunately few and far between at the moment, they focus on that SNP has caused a problem in the end result of the enzyme. You know, sometimes Dr. Bruce Ames is focused on this a lot. So with MTHFR, you can drive a bunch of vitamin B2 to the individual because the SNP that caused the MTHFR gene to not bind vitamin B2 very well. Vitamin B2 can't sit on the gene very well to get it to work. So if you put a bunch of vitamin B2, then MTHFR works a bit better. Or you can bypass it by taking a various nutrient. So don't worry about lingo, okay? That's why I didn't define SNPs. I'm not going to define genes and all their function. I don't want you focusing on that, okay? I understand that it's important, you know, to understand some basis, but I don't want you focusing too much on it. But yeah, it was a good question. I should have clarified that. So what do genes do? We talked about how genes do work, right? That's what they do. So if you wake up in the morning, you have things to do. You need to be alert, and if you're not alert, what do? You reach for coffee. What's that caffeine do? It stimulates your brain. Gets the dopamine going, gets the norepinephrine going, right? It gets you up and going. Now, if you can't sleep at night, what do? You take melatonin, right? So if you take the melatonin, it means your genes weren't able to make the melatonin for some reason. So you had to bypass them because they weren't doing the job that you needed. Why couldn't you make your own melatonin? Did you have the lights on? Were you watching Netflix? Were you on your phone? Were you stressed out? Are your genes not working right? What's going on? So you need to understand that genes have work, and work is known as substrate as scientific terms. So substrate equals work. Work goes into the gene, and it makes something. So if I put in steel to the enzyme, and I get a shovel at the end, that's the work that was done and the output. But what does it take for that to happen? That's the cofactor. I needed machines to do that. I needed heat to do that. I needed workers to do that. If I had good workers, I could increase the production and make better shovels faster. If I had unskilled laborers, or I had power loss, or a fire went out, I'm going to decrease the activity of the forge, and I'm not going to get the shovels that I need. So in life, if you can increase activity of genes for various things. If you're stressed out, then that stress can speed up some genes and it can slow down others. if you're exposed to mercury or aluminum or heavy metals or phthalates or plastics or all these other things, these burden the enzymes and the genes. Some will slow down and some will speed up. Now, cofactors are vitamins and minerals. It boggles my mind that we don't study the impact of vitamins and minerals across all medical schools across the entire world, because it's the vitamins and minerals which are driving our genes to work. Yes, medications do as well, but all they do is increase or decrease the activity of the genes. It doesn't support the natural function. So there's no cofactor, there's no drug known to man that will bind as a vitamin and mineral and make that gene work as natural, okay, naturally. Yes, folic acid will get in there and mess things up, but not how the body intended. Most people don't understand that their daily actions, every single day you make a choice, and every single day that choice you can change it. You reach for the Twinkie, you know it's not good, but it tastes good and it gives you that lift, so you eat the Twinkie. Food science is really, really good. They know how to hit that dopamine receptor. Sugar, if a rat is on cocaine and they put sugar in there, you will stop eating the cocaine and go to the sugar. So, it's powerful stuff. Processed foods, nutrient excesses and deficiencies, pathogens, molds, microbes, yeast, not breathing right. Nobody's taught us to focus on breathing. I saw today, you guys were focusing on Tai Chi and yoga and exercise. You have to do proper breathing. Air is our fuel. We think food is our fuel. It is. But air is our #1 fuel. Without air, we're dead within 3 minutes. We can live without food for days. So air is your #1 fuel. You have to breathe properly. And most people don't. Chemicals, radiation, everywhere. Aging, we can't get away from it. Drugs, we can for the most part, but drugs, they have their pros and cons. Sugars and carbohydrates. Inflammation, mother care. What was going on at the time of you being inside your mom's womb, right? What was she exposed to? What was her mom exposed to? All that's carried onto your genes as well. Unfortunately, all of these things are impacting our genes, but fortunately, most of them we can control. Most of them do cause damage and cause gene instability, but what people are focusing on are SNPs. They're focusing on the little things from the genetic test, 23andMe or Genos or whatever genetic test they have, and they're forgetting the entire focus of pathogens, inflammation, diet, mindset, environment. They're totally disregarding that, and they're going right to the SNPs. They're going right to MTHFR. They're going right to COMT. Am I right? And they don't even focus on those things. So if I'm trying to make shovels, and I'm sitting there trying to make the forge working, and I get the forge working as well as I can, but my employee who's running the forge is absolutely drunk and asleep. Is that going to help? No. So let's say that the forge had a snip, maybe the door to let more air in so that you get a bigger fire was still lit stuck. And I fixed that. Maybe I got a fan or something. I got the fan working really well. But the guy is still asleep on the job. If you're still not addressing all of these things at the top, and you're focusing only on the genes, you will not have success. Guaranteed. 100% failure. So you have to understand, you have to do the fundamental stuff. It's boring. It's what your grandma told you to do. It's what your mom and dad told you to do. It's what you know you have to do, but there's no quick fix. So let's look at this. So I want to show you, again, I talked about speeds, and I like to group things. So a lot of you who has genetic reports run? Who's played with them? Hands up. Okay. Who's terrified to look at their genes? Don't be afraid about raising your hands, okay? Now, I get that, and if you are terrified, don't do it unless you have a great health professional to help you, because it will only drive more fear and confusion, and so don't do it. And if you're curious, maybe start with just MTHFR or just start with one gene and get comfortable with that. You know, or you can run 23andMe and run through StrateGene and give it to your doctor and say, don't tell me what I've got, just, you know, let's work through it together. But if you're terrified of it, you know, work through it. But I will tell you that if you have in the right hands of a good health professional, this is very, very helpful. It's very helpful and should not be scared. I can't tell you. I mean, some people are scared of heights, some people aren't. So, but it is a very useful tool when it's used properly. So genes have different speeds when they have a SNP. So if there's a misspelling in a gene, its performance is altered. So sometimes the performance is altered a little bit, sometimes it's altered a lot. Like it's completely gone, 100%. It's not even there, it's not helping you anymore at all.
So when you say speed, are you talking about production of the enzyme?
Yeah, the production, the enzyme gets produced, but the enzyme is not working very well.
So the activity of the enzyme is slowed down.
Yes, the activity of the gene is messed up. The shape typically is altered. So if the shape is altered, it can't bind the cofactor, or it won't turn off or won't turn on. So SLC19A1, that supports folate transport. MTHFR is also due with folate, so that's why I group those two together. So David's ability to get folate into his system, carried, and support methylation is reduced pretty significantly. Genetically, not environmentally. This doesn't mean, this is not a death sentence. That just means he's susceptible to lower folate transport and lower folate. Okay, that's all it means. It doesn't mean he has it. It means he's susceptible to it. His methylation cycle is a little bit slower with that MTRR gene. That gene, his job is to reduce and recycle vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 gets damaged, and his ability to regenerate and keep his vitamin B12 healthy is altered a bit. Not a lot, but a bit. So that's something to understand, and I'll show you a bit later why that's important. Now, his detoxification ability of cleaning out chemicals and also the garbage that our own body produces. You know that we make hydrogen peroxide? Our own bodies make hydrogen peroxide. Our own bodies make bleach. Our hair turns gray. Have you ever seen or experienced yourself a tremendous stressful experience and your hair went from colored when you're young to gray or white? You see it in animals too. Animals will also, you'll come home from vacation, your animal will have gray hairs because they're totally stressed out. It's hydrogen peroxide.
I thought that was just something that affected presidents.
Yeah, and then the people they represent as well, right? Yeah, the presidents, man, that's a stressful job. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, you saw it in Obama. In fact, I did a presentation about glutathione, and I used Obama because he had beautiful black hair, and he had gray within 8 years, big time. So superoxide dismutase, SOD2, that's slower, so his ability to get rid of some of these oxidative damaging compounds in the body is reduced. And his glutathione, GSTP1, he can't carry out some chemicals very well, but other chemicals he can carry out faster. There's variation with that. His ability for acetylation is slowed down, so his ability to get rid of histamine, his ability to get rid of some toxic compounds for like barbecuing is also reduced. Sulfation is slow, but that is normally slow in all of us because it's easily overburdened. That's the SOLT 1A1. That's only 10% slower, but that is very, very environmentally triggered. His MAO A is also slow, so it's not able to get rid of dopamine, serotonin, or make melatonin very well. Are you able to fall asleep pretty easily, or is this difficulty?
I always did do, but in the last year I'm having sleep problems.
Okay.
I'm taking 2 milligrams of melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
Just,
Okay, but you used to fall asleep no problem.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay. So before, he used to fall asleep okay, but now he's having difficulty with it. So despite his ability to move out the dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, he was still able to fall asleep. So again, genes are not your destiny. It just shows susceptibility. Now, it's amplifying a bit. So now his genes are struggling, and these SNPs are contributing a little bit more, and they're amplifying the problems. So go to the next one. So if you look here, again, I don't like looking at genes in isolation, because if you look at a gene in isolation, it doesn't help you out any, right? If somebody tells you, if you want to get to the gas station, and they tell you, yeah, the gas station's 10 miles that way, that helpful? No, you got to know which roads to go down, left or right. You know, you got to understand all the whole mapping so you can get there. So this is basically map, and you start at the top, and these are the genes in the human body. The bubbles are genes, and the green with the little arrows coming off the genes are the cofactors, the vitamins and minerals that drive them. And then you have the purple; those slow the genes down. Those are kind of like the brakes on the genes that get in their way of performance. That's the drunk guy at your office who's not performing. The orange is the things which makes those genes go faster. They make them, perform and make the end product better. So you see at the top right, SLC, that's the ability to transport folate is reduced by about 50% in David's body. That's increased susceptibility. Doesn't mean it's happening, but that one particular SNP is associated with slower folate transport. If you go down the list, you can see he's got green circles around MTHFR1. That means that there's no SNPs associated with that, and there's no problems genetically in that specific area. But there could be vitamins and minerals and other things slowing those genes down. MTHFR is at the bottom, and he does have a genetic issue there, so that gene is slowed down. So potentially. So it's reduced in function. And what does that MTHFR gene do? What's it make? It makes this right here. Oh, you can't see my arrow. So if you follow MTHFR to the right, you can see 5-MTHF, right? Yeah. That's what MTHFR makes. It makes 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. And there's an asterisk next to that. And you can see in the bottom right corner of the slide there, it says leafy greens. So even if your MTHFR gene isn't working very well and you're eating salad, you're good. If you're not eating salad, you're not good. So David, did you eat a lot of salad as a kid?
I grew up on a farm. We had lots of it, yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Excellent. So if he's eating lots of veggies, grew up on a farm, again, the environment is important, but what was going on that farm? Were there chemicals used? Were other neighbors using chemicals? Was the well water clean? What were other potential exposures? So that's what I like to do with these types of reports. As a health professional, I would be asking these questions to see if these particular genes are causing problems or not. He was eating his greens. Okay, MTHFR is not an issue, but my next question, grew up on a farm, I'm immediately thinking, okay, exposures. I grew up on a ranch too. We had clusters flying over our house. So, and then the StrateGene report, there's these paragraphs which very few people read because yes, it is in scientific lingo, but I am a naturopathic physician and I have a lot of arrows in my back because I'm a quack. And quacks, you need to maintain integrity. So I try to maintain integrity by citing research, using PubMed, National Library of Medicine, and using scientific lingo, and then translating it as I can. So this job of this gene is to transport folate. Pretty important, right? A lot of us think if we just eat food and we absorb it, it's done. No. We eat the food, we absorb it, which is difficult for a lot of us still. Then it has to be carried. Then it has to get to the cell membrane to bind to a receptor in order to get in the cell. Once it gets in the cell, and then it has to do its job. So eating your food or swallowing your vitamins is step one out of many. That doesn't mean you're getting the nutrients that you need. Not even close. So you can see here, minus 50%. So this gene, this one particular SNP in this one gene is reduced the amount of the specific type of folate, a very active form, its transport by half. That's a big deal. So even though he was eating a lot of salads, this one particular gene, he wasn't transporting the folate through his body very well. So his levels of this particular nutrient, even if it's high enough in his blood, may not have been carried to the cell and done its job that it needed to do. So that's one risk factor here. And then MTRR was one of the other SNPs that was found. And you can see here that you have methylcobalamin, which is your active form of vitamin B12. And it goes through and it becomes damaged. And it gets regenerated by methylation, vitamin B2, and niacin. That's what SAM, that's what the green letters are. SAMe, riboflavin, and niacin. FAD is your active riboflavin, NAD is your active, well, it's niacin that became that, and other things. But that's slowed down. So he has more damaged vitamin B12 floating around, potentially. And if that vitamin B12 is more damaged, then his ability to support methylation is going down. And if his folate is low because it's not transported very well, now his methylation is hurting even more, and his homocysteine levels can go up. How is your homocysteine level?
2 years ago it was 8.5.
It was what?
8.5.
8.5, not bad.
I recently had a retest with another result back yet.
Okay. Okay, so 8.5 is not bad. And the problem is homocysteine by itself doesn't really tell you very much. You need to look at other things too. And I'm sure Lori has gone into great extent because homocysteine makes your glutathione. So I'm sure David's body has needed a lot more glutathione, so your homocysteine will go down to make your glutathione, and you can be using up your homocysteine that way. So even if your homocysteine is trying to go up through that MTR gene to support your methylation, it can't if your B12 is damaged. And the homocysteine will go down to make glutathione. Yeah? Okay. So again, it's slowed, but I don't know how much it's slowed, but it's slowed down your ability to methylate. So these other genes, the yellow, David has some variation in the SOD gene and the GST gene. And the SOD gene, its job is to get rid of, see that red O2 minus above SOD? That's red for a reason, because it damages the body. And so the SOD's job is to take that red O2 minus, that superoxide, that super damaging oxidative stress chemical, out and turn it into H2O2. You can see after SOD has done its job, you can see it produced H2O2. You see that? Yeah. Okay. So, but his ability to move that superoxide out is slower. So his ability to turn that O2 minus into H2O2 is not very fast. So that O2, what it does is it converts to nitric oxide and turns into peroxynitrate, which is also very damaging. And that gets in your brain and does a lot of things, and it goes around and wreaks havoc anywhere. So SOD, its job is to make H2O2, which then is hydrogen peroxide, and GPX is your glutathione peroxidase. So when you take glutathione, what you're doing is you're neutralizing that H2O2, that red stuff. But David might not have much of that red stuff because SOD is slowed down, right? He can't make much of it from that particular gene. And then you see GST is also slowed, and GST's job is to bind chemicals and to get them out. So if he's exposed to various chemicals, they might stay in his body, whereas other people who don't have a GST problem, they can get rid of them. And so in understanding how genes work, so factors influencing SOD, we talked about the SNP here, slowing it down, because it says this variant may imply intermediate activity, so it's slightly slowed. But you also need to understand that manganese can increase this gene working too fast and making a lot of hydrogen peroxide. And then glutathione, if he's low in glutathione, it can't keep up. So if David's or any of yours or any of ours, manganese levels are too high, we could be hurting ourselves. So manganese is very damaging and very toxic in high amounts.
How do you get rid of it if it is?
You don't eat it, and then you can work with a doctor to pull it out, chelate it, just like mercury or other heavy metals. But you just look for foods that are high in manganese and stop eating them for a bit. But work with your doctor too to pull them out. but you can order a lab too to look at your manganese levels. And then GSTP1, this is another gene. So you can see here, there's an arrow going up and down. It's like, well, what's that mean? Well, some research papers say, well, it pulls out certain chemicals quicker, and other papers say it pulls out these other chemicals slower. So there's varying effects. So what this gene does, it can bind, say, this cup really well, it can get it out, but it can't bind the pen, right? It has set jobs it can do really well, and other ones it can't. So if you add in the mechanism, so as before, I like understanding how genes work and what they do, and what are the processes of disease, right? If we just focus on the genes and the SNPs, and we don't understand how the genes are working, then we don't understand how to fix it or how to correct it and what's going on. So in this paper, these are just references that you can look at later with your doctor, but catecholamines are stress neurotransmitters. They're dopamine, your serotonin, your dopamine, norepinephrine, and your epinephrine. And these come out when you're stressed out or if you're exercising hard. So they also allow you to focus. They're good, but in excess, they can be problematic. So what happens is these can make problems, and they can involve the formation of reactive oxygen species, which David has a reduced ability to clear out. He doesn't have a fully functioning SOD. He doesn't have a fully functioning GST. And he has other genes too, which I'll show you later, which cause further potential problems for oxidative stress. And dopamine, who knows about dopamine quinone? Okay, dopamine quinone is one of those things which is very damaging in the brain, and it's very associated with Parkinson's disease. And so it happens when your dopamine gets stuck or when your brain is on fire. So if you have a slower ability to move out dopamine and you have high levels of manganese, or you have low glutathione, or your SOD genes aren't working very well, or you have a bunch of exposures to various things, or you're highly stressed, your risk of dopamine quinone levels is higher. So, and there's a lot of papers discussing the relation between dopamine quinone and Parkinson's. So again, I showed this reactive oxygen species slide, the reds here, the ONOO minus, the O2 minus, the H2O2. These are all reactive oxygen species which can play a role in having your whole body on fire or specific areas in your brain. Well, reactive oxygen species are red, and so you know antioxidants, right? Vitamin C, vitamin E are your antioxidants. So your antioxidants deal with these red things. Your vitamin C, your glutathione, your vitamin E, they work on clearing out these things. So that's their job.
Are you talking inflammation?
Inflammation or pro-oxidation. Yeah, so inflammation can cause fire, but you might have a type of local inflammation that your whole body, you don't even know. You know, you might not even have a headache, you might not have pain, but your body is getting damage to the cells because these things are damaging it and you have no idea it's happening. So you might have these things and you not even know it. So that's why you go to a good doctor like Lori, who will find these things and you can neutralize them. Dopamine oxidation, we talked about that. So, okay, dopamine is getting damaged, right? So dopamine is getting oxidized, it's getting damaged. What does that mean? What do I do about that? Okay, so if Parkinson's is known to have dopamine that's getting burned up, it's getting damaged, there's low antioxidants, what do I do about it, right? Is my dopamine getting cleared out? Because everybody talks about Parkinson's being low dopamine, right? Nobody talks about Parkinson's being high dopamine, perhaps causing higher quinone formation, which is causing the brain to be on fire, which is leading to the actual problem. So they talk here, a novel dietary strategy is proposed that's specifically tailored toward lowering the risk of human Parkinson's disease, which includes eating a nutritionally balanced diet that contains adequate, not excessive, fruits and veggies, supplementation of SAMe, vitamin C, B6, B12, and folate, it is believed that these consensual developments would also aid in our better understanding of other neurodegenerative disorders. So you need to understand, yes, how it's happening, but also how you can support it. In this paper, I would like you can read this over with your health professional. I don't have time today to go over it, but I believe this is a free paper as well that you can download in full and get a good, solid understanding of it as well. So you can just type that black deep heading in Google, it'll pop up. So what then keeps dopamine sticking around? What increases the risk for dopamine quinone? We talked about the reactive oxygen species already, the SOD and the GSTP1, but there's also COMT here. David has both COMTs plus, so his ability to move dopamine out is reduced significantly, very much so. But again, as you're younger, that's great because you can focus and perform and do well and think and be a real go-getter. His methylation is slightly low through MTRR. His ability to move serotonin out and other dopamine out with MAOA is also slowed. And I will show you here. So you can see dopamine. You guys see dopamine? You see COMT in the red? So, and then you see COMT down below, a little bit lower. You see serotonin in purple, and you see another COMT. And then you see MAO. You see, so that dopamine, it's trying to get out. He built the dopamine in his brain, and COMT needs to be able to clear it out, but it's slowed down. He can't get rid of it, and very quickly. And then it's slowed here. And then the MAO is green, but that is also slowed down. So his ability to move his neurotransmitters out is reduced. And what's a very common drug used for Parkinson's? L-DOPA. There it is. You see L-DOPA going to dopamine? So we know that L-DOPA works temporarily, but we also know that eventually it stops working, right? It causes further problems. So if you keep giving L-DOPA, but you haven't supported the clearance and the movement of dopamine and you haven't reduced the oxidative stress or the other factors at play, then that L-DOPA is going to contribute to further dopamine being stuck in the brain. So while it's useful temporarily to support dopamine levels, long-term it can cause issues if all the other downstream pathways are blocked. Meaning, if you have a sink at home and you're washing dishes and you've had clogged toilets, clogged sinks, right? If the drain is not as fast as the incoming water, overflow. Overflow is symptomatology. So you need some dopamine, you need some L-DOPA, but you still need to be able to drain these things out naturally. And here is dopamine quinone. This is a more intense thing. Don't worry about all the stuff here. But you can see, again, dopamine trying to get out through the COMT, trying to get through a MAOB, and COMT here again. But you can see quinone, red. So if your dopamine is stuck, its ability to turn into dopamine quinone is accelerated, accentuated, which then can cause further damage in the brain. Yes. Time. So VDR, David has, you can see the red VDR BSM1, VDR TAC1, and VDR FOC1. Now don't worry about all these gene names, but understand that they are red and understand that research on VDR is all over the place. And VDR is a vitamin D receptor. Vitamin D does a ton of things. It's a hormone. It works with your insulin. It works with your inflammation. It works for infections. It does a ton of many important jobs. So, but you need to understand that if you order just a 25-hydroxy vitamin D test, that doesn't really tell you anything. You need to also understand if there's infections at play, if there's Lyme involved, and I like to order another marker called 125-hydroxy vitamin D, and that's what is there. So look at these different labs and talk with your doctor about that. So you must look at infections. I also hear FADS2 and FADS1 and PMT. Again, these are just genes. Their jobs are to support cell membrane formation. So if your house has leaky walls or your windows don't shut, then invaders can come in, right, and steal your stuff. If you don't lock the door, they come in, take your stuff. So these make the walls of all your cells. And if your cells are leaky, then chemicals come in and vitamins leak out, and there they die. They don't do well. So David's risk here is increased, that his cell membranes are not as healthy as they should be, potentially. So he needs to focus on making sure that he is not eating higher omega-6 foods. He's supporting with a nutrient called phosphatidylcholine to make sure his cell membranes are working well and intact. So he needs to make sure his home for every single one of his cells is healthy, because these are slightly reduced in their support. Again, red blood cell fatty acids test and lipid peroxides, we'll look at that. NQO1, CoQ10. We all know CoQ10, right? Well, David, he cannot be taking the cheap CoQ10 that's over the counter. He cannot convert that ubiquinone to ubiquinol very well. He has a 3 times less effective ability to convert that. Okay, and there's other NQO1s that are really informative that 23andMe doesn't test for. 23andMe doesn't test for very many clinically relevant SNPs. We have another 100 more that we want to add to this report that we're working on. FUT2 supports vitamin B12, and absorption in the gut, also works on the microbiome in the gut. So if your gut health isn't where it needs to be, then that's a big issue. And I'm sure you guys have understood that for many, many times over. That's Peter D'Adamo's work and a lot of other people's as well. TNF-alpha, that's inflammation. That's fire. So he has increased production of fire. He's more sensitive. So, you know, there's some fabrics that will light on fire faster, right? So what do? We put fire retardant on them. So delay the risk of fire by what? 10 seconds or something. So now we're all loaded with fire retardants. But David is very sensitive to inflammation. Now that's good, short term, right? Because inflammation supports the immune system. It supports getting the bad guys out and cooking out the problems. But long term, that's not good. Because if you're stuck on fire, your house never goes out, right? There's just ashes left. So once that fire starts with David, it just continues to smolder. So it needs to make sure that we keep that fire down at bay. Otherwise, the cell membranes, which have difficulty repairing, right, as we saw earlier, then they can't repair. So you have to make sure the inflammation is down. He's getting adequate CoQ10 and the vitamin B12 and so on. Now, thankfully, David does not have these SNPs, HFE. Who's heard of hemochromatosis? High iron. So you run a serum ferritin test, and if your iron is high, that's very, very pro-inflammatory. And you can have low iron, low serum ferritin, and the doctor will say, oh, you have low iron, and they give you a shot, and then you're lit up. That happened to my wife. She has anemia of chronic disease because she struggles with rheumatoid arthritis ever since she was 16 years old. I'm convinced it's gut. It's tough. I don't treat her. She's not my patient. Yeah, I know better. But that said, I did know that even though she had low serum ferritin, and yes, she's tired, I knew that if you got iron, it would light her on fire. It did. She was legitimately screaming at night in pain. I've never seen her like that. And that was from an IV of iron. And God, it was horrible. It's horrible. So watch your serum ferritin, keep your iron at bay. So again, don't focus on just your genetic problems. They are a tool. And you had a great question earlier about we want to order labs. So StrateGene by itself is useful, but with labs and history, that's what you need to do. You cannot make any decisions by just this StrateGene report by itself. It's not possible. If you read FUT2 and it says, oh, you're likely to be B12 deficient, you don't go to the store and buy B12. And in TNF-alpha, you don't go out and buy more antioxidants. It's not how it works. You work with a doctor, you work with the labs, you work with the history, you work with all these things here, the negatives, by supporting with positives out there on the door, which you guys were doing this morning, by walks and meditation and proper breathing. All these things are really important. So don't focus just on the genes and StrateGene. It's just another tool that you bring to your doctor, but you cannot forget these things. So taking action, we've been through all these here. What are the instruments? What was I meaning by these instruments? What do you think?
They're different genes.
They're different genes.
They may use it.
They make different music and different types of music, right? Right?
Oh, it sounds
They all work together.
They work together in concert. Great point. So playing in isolation, yeah, it's okay, but you work together and you got an amazing symphony. Works great. But what happens, yeah, you have to have the right person playing it, and they have to be tuned, because what happens, symphonies, they're tuning their instruments prior to playing, right? You can hear an out-of-tune single, you can pick it out from the entire symphony if somebody goes, twang, and then you get all embarrassed and go like this, right? So if your genes are not tuned, then your whole body is not tuned, and you will have an outcome of that. You will have symptoms. So life is a continuous motion of tuning your instrument, and your instrument is this amazing body that we're all born with. So we have to keep our instruments tuned. We have to learn how to play it, which you're here today and investing your time and effort into this, which is fantastic, because we all have to learn how to play our own instrument. And we have to make sure that the conductor is leading us appropriately too, right? We could have the best instruments, we could have the best musicians out there, but if the conductor is making the wrong motions or the movements, or telling the violins to go at the wrong time, and the percussionists were delayed, and then everything starts falling apart, right? Who's the conductor? You. Yeah, the doctor is part of the conductor, but you are taking what the doctor is providing you, but ultimately you are your conductor. Your doctor is a guide. The doctor is only a guide. The doctor is not there to fix you. The doctor is there to guide you. So you are in the driver's seat. If you are working with a doctor that you are not resonating with and you are not getting better, you don't have good rapport with, move on. Move on. It's your life. So Dirty Genes is a great place to start, because what it does is it teaches you things that you were never taught before. How your genes work and what they do, and why certain foods are important, why too much exercise is bad. And you take quizzes in there to see if you're on fire. And if you are on fire, what you can do with that. And then in the back, in the appendix, there's all these different labs that you can take to your doctor and say, I want these labs. So, what's this? It's an equalizer. What does it do? Right. Okay. So if some of your instruments are just not quite right, they're just not quite right, or the acoustics of the room isn't quite right, or your voice was slightly off that day, you can play with the equalizer, with supplements, with various foods, with sleeping more, with taking longer vacations, with taking various medications, with stop taking various medications. So putting things in your mouth or stopping doing things, that's your equalizer. It's your adjusting, you're fine-tuning it. Again, going to a concert, a live event is great, but listening to a recorded album is even better, because the mixer is taking out all the faults. So that's why we put those images there. I think you guys got it. Thank you for your time.